the BBC World Service. I'm Razia Iqbal. In Myanmar, a new tactic from security forces, trapping protesters in a neighbourhood in the biggest city, Yangon.
They just check every apartment and every street in Sanjong, and they block every corner of the streets in Sanjong. Hundreds of young demonstrators trapped.
The European Parliament strips 3 Catalan members of immunity from prosecution. Who gains, Spain or the Catalan independence movement? Aboriginal people in the state of Victoria welcome Australia's first inquiry into the impact of colonisation.
For the first time in our nation's history, we can move forward with a truth-telling process which gives our communities opportunity to start their journey towards healing.
And meeting a meteorite.
Imagine if you had a favourite celebrity who you really hero worshipped and one day they turned up on your doorstep. It's that level of excitement.
First, the world news.
Hello, this is Julie Candler with the BBC News. The former regional leader of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, has denounced a decision by the European Parliament to strip him and 2 fellow separatists of their immunity as MEPs. The decision opens the way for Spain to restart moves to extradite the 3 to face sedition charges over their role in a failed independence bid. Guy Hedgecoe reports from Madrid.
Carles Puigdemont described this as a sad day for the European Parliament after its members voted in favour of stripping him, Clara Ponsatí and Antoni Comín of their immunity. The trio now say they will appeal before the European Court of Justice, alleging irregularities and political persecution by Spain. The Spanish Foreign Minister, Arantxa González, welcomed the result of the vote and said it had shown that the crisis surrounding Catalonia's relationship with the rest of the country should be dealt with in Spain rather than abroad.
Widespread protests have continued in Myanmar, with peaceful but angry demonstrations against the military taking place across the country. Troops are increasingly using the tactic of sealing off neighbourhoods to round up large numbers of suspected dissidents. Here's our Southeast Asia correspondent, Jonathan Head.
The military authorities who seized power in Myanmar last month are now trying to squeeze the life out of the protest movement, which opposes them in every corner of the country. The intention appears to be to break local resistance through mass arrests and nightly sieges. Nearly 2,000 people have been detained since the coup. There are well-founded fears for their safety. The body of the director of a vocational school was returned to his family this afternoon. He'd been detained late last night. He's the 3rd man to die in custody since the weekend.
The Group of Developed Nations, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, has issued a report suggesting prospects for global growth have markedly improved. The authors are forecasting growth this year of 5.6%. Andrew Walker has more details.
The improvement in the economic outlook reflects the deployment of effective vaccines. The OECD now predicts that global economic activity will rise to above pre-pandemic levels by the middle of this year. That said, even by the end of next year, it will be below what it would probably have been without the health crisis. Among the G20 major economies, the OECD expects only 2, the United States and Turkey, to be ahead of where the agency previously expected. The likely shortfall on that basis is especially large for some emerging economies, notably India, Indonesia and South Africa.
A court in Tunisia has sentenced the brother-in-law of the ousted president, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, to 10 years in jail for corruption. The court found that Belhassan Trabelsi had set up a private company to siphon off advertising revenues from state television. World News from the BBC. Britain has agreed to return to Nigeria nearly $6 million stolen by the former governor of Delta State, James Ibori. He was convicted in the UK of fraud, forgery and money laundering. London says the funds will be spent on improving infrastructure, including roads. Ben Hunt reports.
This is the first time that money recovered from criminals in the UK will be returned to Nigeria after an agreement was signed in 2016 to recover and return the proceeds of bribery or corruption. In 2012, James Ibori, the former governor of Nigeria's Delta State, pleaded guilty in a British court to money laundering, conspiracy to defraud and forgery, and was sentenced to a total of 13 years in prison. Since then, UK law enforcement agencies say they have led operations to identify and recover assets bought by Mr. Ibori with money stolen from public funds in Nigeria.
A peer review study has found that a coronavirus vaccine developed by an Indian company is safe and has shown high levels of antibody response in a mid-stage trial. But the study said more follow-on analysis was required to evaluate Bharat Biotech's Covaxin for children and elderly people. A Senegalese opposition group has suspended plans for 3 days of huge protests called by the opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. Mr. Sonko was freed from detention on Monday but still faces a rape charge, which he says is politically motivated. At least 8 people have died during days of violent protests in Senegal, sparked by the arrest of Mr. Sonko on separate charges of public disorder. Japan's top news agency, Kyodo, is reporting that the government has concluded that foreign spectators will not be able to attend this year's Olympic Games. Kyodo said overseas fans would not be welcome because of concerns over coronavirus. The report, which cited government sources familiar with the matter, could not be independently confirmed. BBC News.
Hello, I'm Razia Iqbal. Welcome to NewsHour. From the BBC World Service, it comes to you live from our studios in central London. We begin today with the situation in Myanmar. Week 6 since the military coup began, and it doesn't look as though there is any appetite to give up on the part of activists who want the civilian government reinstated. Nor are there any indications that the army might concede or engage in a total suppression of strike action and demonstrations. What appears to be happening on a daily basis is the push and pull of conflict on the streets and some shifting of tactics on either side, an increase in pressure on those in small pockets of resistance. Yesterday, dozens of protesters who had been cornered overnight appear to have escaped. Soldiers had been using a combination of stun grenades and gunfire in their assault on the neighbourhood. The activists were trapped inside apartment blocks in the Sanchong neighbourhood after police announced on Monday they would check houses for anyone from outside the district. They warned they would punish anyone caught hiding the protesters. Murat Chortun is a reporter and lives in Sanchong, close to the blocked-off area. He described what had happened overnight.
Started around 4 p.m. and they blocked every corner of the streets in Sanjong. And then hundreds of young demonstrators trapped inside the apartments after that, including my friends, my best friends, trapped inside the apartments.
Can I just be clear that, in your view, the residents of this area were protecting the protesters, so both the residents and the activists were in danger from the security forces? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Because, the many demonstrators, after they escaped from the crackdown, from the apartment, they just posted on their social media that the residents in Sanjong are really helpful, even treated them as their family members. So that kind of hospitality is spread on social media very rapidly. So the security forces targeted on the residents that you guys are helping the demonstrators that we are seeking at night.
So tell me exactly what happened between the period where the residents took in the activists to protect them and were hiding them. What then happened? What did the security forces do, and where are these activists now?
First of all, there were over 100 demonstrators trapped inside the Sanjong. Many people were really worried about after 1 a.m. because the internet is cut off between 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. every day. Around 12 a.m. at midnight, 6 military trucks came out from the Sanjong. I saw them. At least 15 were arrested, and then I saw them inside the trucks. In the morning, my best friend trapped inside the Sanjong called me in the morning and that, we escaped around 5 a.m. in the morning.
So quite a few of the activists managed to leave at about between 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning. Let me ask you about the tactics of the security forces. This feels to us, looking at the situation in Myanmar, the first time that this has happened. Is that right? Is this a new tactic by the military?
we've been experienced tear gases every day, some grenades every day. And then they used slingshots and throwing stones with the metal stones. After demonstrators went into the apartments, they shouted with the loudspeaker, residents cannot keep them inside. If you keep them, you can be sued with the household law. The Jonathan City government abolished the household law. So the security forces cannot knock your door at night and then check your houses. But around February 5, the military reformed the household law.
I suppose, given that the whole country is living under martial law, the army can do much as it
whatever they want.
Yeah, they can do it whatever they want. Are you concerned now, given what's happened in Sanchong, that the military might escalate their tactics and in fact they are becoming more bold than they were before?
It's complicated because we've seen enough about the 22 Light Infantry Division, which was really notorious in the Rakhine crisis when they cracked down on Rohingya. But right now, they are all gone from the crackdown. So we only seen some battalions in Yangon and other major cities. So it's like they separate their divisions into other areas from Yangon and major cities. So we cannot say what's going on.
Would you say that the activists are determined still, that they are not in any way in a place where they might be thinking about giving up?
I don't think so, because the leaders are brainstorming what to do next. Last night in Sanchong, the whole Yangon was completely dark. Today, everybody promised to switch on the lights for the whole night so we can see the security forces are coming or not. People are still improving their resistance and improving their tactics. So I don't think they will give up.
That was a reporter who lives in Sanchong, Mrat Chautun. Now, recent mass kidnappings of children in Nigeria have been making global headlines. There have been 4 abductions from northern Nigerian schools in the last 3 months alone, the latest in Zamfara state, with nearly 800 children taken. It was the seizure of the girls from Chibok by the Islamic militant group Boko Haram in Borno state that led to an international outcry back in 2014. Today, more than 100 of those girls remain missing. One of those that escaped, Naomi Adamu, is the protagonist of a new book that's come out called Bring Back Our Girls by Joe Parkinson and Drew Hinshaw. She told our correspondent Mayani Jones how the latest abductions have been making her feel.
When I heard about the abductions at the school in Zamfara, I couldn't sleep at night. I don't want the children to go through what I went through. Even now, I still get scared when I hear gunshots, even when they come from the Nigerian military and not Boko Haram.
Boko Haram are still active in northeastern Nigeria. It's been over 10 years now that they've been waging war in the region. Did you think that they would still be active, terrorizing people till today?
No, because when we left there, they were splitting into 2 groups, so we thought they were over, finished. They were divided. Some of them were in Sambisa, while some were in Kangarwa.
Whilst you were in captivity, you started writing a diary about your experiences. Tell us about how that started.
The reason why me and my friend wrote this history is, if either of us is free, then our parents will be happy. They will know that the other is also alive. We did not want to live without writing anything. And if we get married, our children will need to hear the history of the difficulties we've gone through. That was why we wrote the diary.
You know, many of the girls who were taken with you got married, and you resisted getting married. You never gave up your faith. How did you know that you wouldn't get killed?
The Boko Haram leader Abubakar Shekau told us that he abducted us, not because he wanted to marry us off to his men, but because he wanted to put pressure on the government to release his men who were in detention. Still, Malam Ahmed, another Boko Haram commander, insisted that I must get married. I told him that I would never get married to Boko Haram, no matter what.
The words of Naomi Adamu. Let's turn to the United States now on COVID-19. Long-term trends which had seen women in the US making progress on equal pay and gender representation have, it appears, been reversed since COVID first started making an impact a year ago. As millions of jobs were lost, women have been affected hardest, with school shutdowns and nursery closures often adding to their plight. Neda Tawfik has been hearing more.
It's a year since COVID first hit the United States, sending people's personal lives and the economy into freefall.
We're in a deep hole with respect to the job market and a long way to dig out.
In a first, female workers have been measurably impacted more than men during this downturn. Millions have lost their jobs. At the same time, women are disproportionately carrying the burden of school shutdowns and nursery closures.
And guess who's more likely to be working and responsible for childcare in this pandemic? Mom.
And some of those still at work are also paying a high price. The reversal of hard-won victories in gender employment, pay, and representation.
In 1 year, the pandemic has put decades of the progress we've collectively made for women workers at risk.
But the COVID crisis has underscored just how incomplete the revolution remains.
This is basically where everything happens.
Starting in New York, a year ago, the center of the pandemic in the United States. And the city's hospitality sector, which employs many women, was hit hard.
That one is a flourless chocolate pistachio cookie.
I'm talking to Dawn Cassels. She's the founder of One Girl Cookies, and she gave me a tour of one of her 3 cafes, an industry city along the scenic waterfront of Sunset Park, Brooklyn.
Prior to the pandemic, we had about 28 employees, and about 24 of them were women. Now we have closer to 17 or 18 employees, many of them now part-time, whereas before they were full-time. And of the people that we have working for us now, all but 6 are women.
Is the reality that some jobs are just never coming back?
Yes, definitely.
This was the first service sector-led recession we'd ever seen, and it was hitting women in a way that we had never seen before.
Diane Swank is chief economist with the accountancy giant Grant Thornton and was stunned by the speed at which jobs were lost.
They're losing 1.7 million jobs, and a large percentage of them, particularly dominated in the service sector like leisure and hospitality, food, restaurants, bars. We also saw it in healthcare. Fast forward to where we are today, and you look at the 4.3 million people that are still missing from the labor force since February of 2020. And 60% of that is women who have dropped out, and the majority of them happen to be women of color.
The economic impact on non-white women has been particularly hard. In Pittsburgh, Diana Moore is one of millions of women who lost their jobs early in the pandemic. She was laid off in April, brought back, and then indefinitely laid off in July.
People just don't understand, you know what I'm saying? We're looked down on. Or like you said, why do you think people got laid off? Because we're the ones that do the essential jobs.
Seeing what COVID has done across all these spectrums of equality and inequality, I see it as what could be a catalyst, because by knowing what's wrong, we have the opportunity to make it a catalyst to get to a better place. I also worry that it could be a catastrophe, and I'd rather it be a catalyst.
That was economist Diane Swank talking to Neda Tawfik for her documentary, The Empty Desk, COVID, Women and the US Economy, which you can hear in full today on the BBC World Service. You're listening to the BBC World Service. I'm Razia Iqbal. This is NewsHour. Coming up, the joy of having carbonaceous chondrite. The editor's done this on purpose, hasn't he? Fall from the sky.
I can't describe how exciting it is. It's imagine if you had a favourite celebrity who you really hero worshipped and one day they turned up on your doorstep. It's that level of excitement. It's just something you never believe will actually happen to you, but it has happened. And so we're all beside ourselves with excitement.
Well, you can certainly hear that in her voice. We will hear about finding a meteorite in 20 minutes' time. Our headlines this hour. The former Catalan separatist leader Carles Puigdemont says the European Parliament's decision to remove his immunity from prosecution marks a sad day for democracy. We'll hear more about that story later in today's programme. And as we've been hearing at the top of our programme, protesters across Myanmar have once again defied military violence to oppose the coup and the detention of activists. This is Razia Iqbal with NewsHour live from the BBC in London. To Australia now, and the state of Victoria has announced an inquiry into the impact of colonisation on Aboriginal people. It's the first of its kind in the country. Called the Yuruk Truth Justice Commission, it has the powers of a royal commission, which means it can compel witnesses to appear before public hearings. I've been speaking to Marcus Stewart. He is the co-chair of the First People's Assembly of Victoria, which is the body that will run the commission in partnership with the state.
Today's announcement is historic. It's a fundamental pillar in our journey towards treaty in Victoria, which we've been working towards since 2016. But this builds on decades of advocacy and generations of activism from Aboriginal communities, from our ancestors, our elders, our old people. So it's really hard to describe how historic today is, because now, for the first time in our nation's history, let alone our state's history, we can move forward with a truth-telling process which gives our communities opportunity to start their journey towards healing.
And what does it tell you then about how long it's taken to get to this point?
233 years is a long time, but importantly, we got here on, the back of enormous struggle and us fighting to be heard and refusing to be silent. We're here now, and now we have the opportunity to ask our fellow Victorian to stand with us and walk with us. Some of the testimonies that we will hear, the public hearings, if that's how they're held, will be really hard to hear. We understand that, we know that, but we also know that our communities, our Aboriginal people here in Victoria, some of the evidence they may give, some of the stories they may share might be re-traumatising, but this is our journey towards true reconciliation.
So tell us the injustices that will be investigated and how. Just outline for us the kind of format that we can expect.
Well, that'll be a decision for the commissioners once appointed, but we'd anticipate that there will be formal submissions, there'll be public hearings, similar to what we've seen in South Africa, where our community members can come and speak their truth, share their stories, whether they're impacted through losing family members through the massacres, whether they've been directly or indirectly impacted by the stolen generations, whether they've lost loved ones in the criminal justice system where we're overrepresented, or whether that be the child protection sector or in a more contemporary form. So there's going to be a vast range of stories that we'll hear. They'll be confronting, they'll be really difficult to listen to, but this is critical in our journey for our communities to heal.
And aside from the truth-telling that you speak about, the centrality of that, what outcomes are you looking for that you think might be possible?
Well, without us predetermining what the outcomes may be, what we see treaty is doing is a way of whatever recommendations come from this process. A treaty is a process of where we can reconcile those recommendations along with whatever else we're currently negotiating through the treaty process. But also, what we see as critical is the opportunity for our fellow Victorian to walk with us and stand with us on this journey, because we're the oldest living culture in the world. It's something that all Australians, all Victorians should be proud of, should connect with and feel that we all belong to.
Marcus Stewart, co-chair of the First People's Assembly of Victoria in Australia. Now let's take you to the Philippines, where personal protective equipment is washing up on coral reefs close to the capital, Manila. According to an estimate by the Asian Development Bank, during the peak of the COVID-19 outbreak, the city could have been generating up to 280 tons of extra medical waste per day. And environmental groups are warning that plastics in surgical face masks are breaking down and being consumed by marine wildlife. They're now urging the government to improve their handling of infectious waste to prevent further pollution of the ocean. Our Philippines correspondent Howard Johnson reports.
I'm on a small dive boat heading towards Caban Cove. That's a body of water around 130 kilometers south of the Philippine capital, Metro Manila. This area, Anilao, has beautiful coral reefs and marine wildlife. Looking down at the water, it's turquoise blue as we travel across it. We're heading towards Caban Cove because we've heard reports that there have been sightings of numerous personal protective equipment strewn across the coral there, and we want to take a closer look.